How do you respond when a topic is above your pay grade? I have an older gentleman that I have known for a number of years. He is agnostic. I asked one day, why are you so vocally angry? 99% of the time, I walk away from conversations of spiritual stuff with this particular person feeling like an epic failure. The one time that I felt like we made any progress was
this week on the Reach Podcast. All right, everybody. Hey, we're back. It's the Reach Podcast, and we've got a very special guest this week, and it's our area director in Columbia, Tennessee, Alyssa Perry. Thank you for being back on the podcast.
Of course.
This is going to be fun. We're going to look at a conversation that you've had, and so why don't we just start there, set it up. What are we going to be talking about today?
So I have an older gentleman that I have known for a number of years. We see each other quite often. His name is Dan.
Okay.
I would say that, I wouldn't actually say this. He would say this about himself. He has said this on numerous occasions, that he is agnostic. And is pretty vocal about that. Not the I don't know part, but actually is very vocal about his hostility towards it. In fact, if you talk about it often, or if someone mentions it, or if you see it on a television or a movie, he'll jokingly under his breath kind of say, oh, that Christian propaganda. So he's pretty vocal about his disinterest with anything to do with Christian faith of any kind.
Interesting. Is he the kind of agnostic that's like I know that there isn't a God,
he is an I don't know. When we talk, it's been interesting. Usually in it's really intimidating to have a conversation with someone who's so vocal about it, because anytime you're entering in, you're kind of entering into a conversation that it's going to make you sweat a little bit. And so the few and far betweens, we've had a number of conversations, but the few and far betweens of conversations where I really felt like I'm prepared to kind of push into this conversation more, take the bait, if you will, when he says something like that, he usually runs the gamut. Like, he will go from emotional situations and talk about that to the intellectual to spiritual. We will run all three. I think I asked one day, why are you so vocally, angry about, I don't even know what it was. It was something it wasn't a sermon or anything. It was maybe someone said a prayer. I can't remember what it was. And we were by ourselves. And so I just kind of said, why? And his response was, the Christian faith really troubles me. And so obviously I wanted to know more about that and asked. And he went on a story that felt really personal and real and raw. And I'm not sure, I was maybe one of the first people that he actually said it to, which was kind of shocking because he's an older gentleman, and it is I've walked into something maybe I don't want to know. But he starts telling a story of getting hurt literally in a car accident. He was on his way to church, believe it or not, when he was a young boy. Okay. About 8 or 9, and his best friend at the time was driving. And they had an accident, and he got thrown from the car and got scar down his face and lost a number of teeth and all of that. It was traumatic. This was before seatbelts were a thing. And, he's telling this story that sounds traumatic in and of itself. And I told him, or I asked, what does this have to do with the Christian faith, though? Like, why does this trouble? And he said, because of what happened after. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, because when he woke up in the hospital room, all he heard people talking about was whether or not he or the other boy were going to sue the church or the other family. I couldn't quite understand, but it was all emotionally tied, right? It was, here I am, an 8-year-old or 9-year-old boy, disfigured with no teeth, not knowing what just happened, and the first things I hear are people talking about if the church is going to be okay, or if we're going to sue the other family, which was never the thing. But I think emotionally, if his story is accurate, which is his story to tell, so I can't confirm or deny it, I think it ended up really kind of rumors spreading throughout their small town, and he and his friend were no longer friends anymore because they were both worried the other one was going to do something, and neither one of them ever did. But he basically was just like, if that's the Christian faith, that like when a young boy gets injured, the first concern is whether or not the church will be okay, then I don't want any part of that. And so he said he walked away after being what he would have called raised in a Christian home at 8 or 9 years old after this accident. So he usually, he's only said that piece once before. But he usually does start with that emotional barrier. But then the minute he gets a little vulnerable, he'll go straight to something I cannot walk through, which is the quantum theory, the relativity string theory, all of these scientific things that I have no background in.
Is that his world?
No, it's not his world. But I've started over the years to wonder if it is his defense mechanism, because he knows when people talk about faith, if on the flip of it, you go all the polar opposite and start talking about these really deep and, scientific things, a lot of people, myself included. Now, I will say, I feel like I've gotten a little bit more information now, but when I've been having these conversations, those are doors I don't feel confident to walk through. Because to be honest, when he's talking about, the theory of relativity and all of this, I don't know if he even knows what he's talking about, right? Because I don't know. But I think he's learned, hey, if I start talking about this, it shuts people up. So I think when he risks being vulnerable, that's where he goes to get people to back away.
Hey everybody, I wanted to take a moment and let you know that the Reach podcast is brought to you by Search, a ministry dedicated to sharing Jesus through friendships and conversations for nearly 50 years. Learn more or get involved at searchnational.org. So how do you get him to get back to a place where you're actually talking about real things, or you're not feeling like he's just trying to stop really the conversation or shut you down?
Well, I would say the first couple of times I really felt like a failure, because a lot of times it would just shut me down. I'll be honest. Because what do you do when someone's talking about something that's a little over your pay grade?
Well, you can always start making stuff up too.
But
we don't recommend that.
We don't recommend that. And
that's a joke.
I will be honest. I think the best method with him over the years has to admit, I don't know. Like, he will sit there with a smile, I know I've got you now. It's almost like this cat and mouse game, which isn't what my heart behind it is at all. Like, when I'm asking these questions, it is to really understand where he's coming from, because I can't I can only meet people where they are, not where I want them to be. So I need to understand where he is. And so when I'm asking these questions, it's not so I can be like, oh, he said that thing, now I've got him. But a lot of times talking to him feels like that's what he's backing. And I'm sure I'm not the only person he does it to.
Sure.
So it feels like he shuts me, but I'll be honest, I'm just honest in the I don't know. Like, hey, I don't know about that. And sometimes the conversation then goes forward. Sometimes it doesn't. But I will say the one time that I've walked away from a conversation and didn't feel like, well, that was an epic failure. And that's 99% of the time I walk away from conversations of spiritual stuff with this particular person feeling like an epic failure. The one time that I felt like we made any progress was he started talking about these deep scientific things and talking about how Christians believe in absolute truths, and that really goes against his one of his many theories, right? That truth could not shift or be subjective. Mm-hmm. That's his stance. And so we were just talking about different things, and I forget the exact wording he used, but something he said made me ask the question, so you don't believe in the supernatural at all? And for whatever reason, that day, that was the question, because he quickly then said, oh, no. I believe in demons and ghosts, and starts rattling all of these things off, which not really, that's above my pay grade too, let's be honest. But I felt like, oh, we made it past this thing. We're now into a different place. And so I asked more questions about that. I'm like, so wait, what do you believe in ghosts? You believe in demons? Like, tell me more about that. And And turns out, and I hope this isn't true for a lot of people, but maybe, he would start then recounting how he has always felt like he has had visitors. That's what he called them. Early in life, he said, I've always remember in my dreams, things talking to me, telling me things, or feeling like there was presence in my room, which again, I'm going, what are we doing? I just went from something I didn't know to something else I really don't know either, right? And so, but I do remember at that moment, I had to like go back to my Rolodex. And I do remember years ago, he had mentioned that he really was a fan of The Lord of the Rings. He loves Tolkien, which on this point, my only goal with somebody like this, right? That's hostile to the gospel, that has emotional barriers, obviously has some intellectual barriers, maybe, because I don't know if he knows what he's talking about. But at this point, my goal is just to have common ground with him, right? To like end on like a good note. And so I immediately started thinking about C.S. Lewis, because he and Tolkien were good friends. Uh-huh. And because I know he respects Tolkien, I'm like, this is something he knows and he respects. So I mentioned C.S. Lewis to him. Of course, he's never read like anything of C.S. Lewis necessarily. But because I had mentioned that they were good friends, I said, it's interesting that C.S. Lewis believes that a belief in any kind of spiritual, whether that's ghosts or demons or whatever, is actually a belief in a divine, a higher power. And I think when I said that, and again, this was all spirit, this was not smarts on Alyssa, because I did not know this is where the conversation was going. It had the same effect on him that him talking about the string theory had on me. It kind of shut him up. And his response was the same with me. He wasn't willing to walk through a door he hadn't researched, but his response was, well, that's interesting. I've never even thought about that. And so he didn't come to Jesus. We didn't end with like this great, I didn't walk away going like, this worked. But I did walk away saying, that was an open door. There was a crack right there, right? And so weeks later, I actually got the Screw Tape letters where some of this is talked about, and I gave it to him. And with no intention of knowing, I'm not going to follow up. I'm going to just see what happens. And lots of things had happened in between then, and I had seen him a couple different times and kind of tried to enter back into the conversation, and it got shut down quickly with like, cool it. He wasn't having it. But I do know he read the book. And so, I think it feels like whiplash, right? When you're talking to somebody like that, like you're going all over the place and you think you're going in with one thing, or you're prepared to go in with one thing, and you're all over the place. And then all of a sudden you're just trying to find a common ground, because there feels like there's so much distance between you, but really there's not, right? Because he's sitting there saying like, I have visitors and I believe in demons. And I'm sitting there going, we can work with that. Never in my life would I be like, I'm excited that you just mentioned demons. I'm no demon expert by any means, but I think that he is a person, if I had to guess, it probably did start emotional. I think intellectual became a safe place for it to hide. But if we're really talking, in Mark 9, when Jesus says this kind can only come out by prayer, if he truly is someone who is experiencing a spiritual barrier or like has visitors all of his life, then it's possible that nothing I could say is really going to move that needle. And I'm supposed to just be praying for him. Now, that doesn't mean, again, like that doesn't mean I don't engage when the door opens, but this might be one of those situations where for this particular person, this only moves if I'm diligent in praying.
Sure. No, it sounds like there's so much going on with this guy, just a ton, and you handled it great. And one of my takeaways is just that you kept going back, you kept talking to him, and you kept asking good questions. And you finally, even though it took a while, you finally got to at least one point that we talked about where he was able to stop and think a little bit. And who knows what God did with that, but it is pretty inconsistent to believe in all the supernatural stuff and then say, I'm a pretty hardline agnostic. So who knows? Maybe God is up to something. And that's the whole point of just sharing this is the real life
Yeah.
This is real life of how these things go. It's super messy.
Because I'm messy. He's messy. Our
Everything's
conversation's messy.
It's all messy. Sometimes you can see what God's doing. Maybe most of the time you really can't. We don't know what's going on, and you might not find out till much later, maybe in heaven, what's happening. But just to encourage people, I would want them to know, like, this is very much how these things go. If you want to really get intentional about talking to people about Jesus and sharing your faith, it's going to be a lot of stuff like this where you're not really sure what's going on.
Yeah. Well, half of the time I don't know what's going on. But again, I mean, I feel like someone said this, someone quoted this, I'm sure. But like, we're not called to be successful. But I am, like, when God lays it on my heart, or someone on my heart, we are called to be faithful in walking through these conversations or these open doors. And even though these conversations with Dan in particular, like, make me shake a little bit and keep me on my toes, they grow me as well, and they are fun and they are exciting. At the end of it, what you just said about, like, I won't know until heaven, that's exciting to think, like. And it may not be because of anything I said. In fact, I hope, like, lots of people are praying for him. I hope lots of people are entering into these conversations with him. But that's the exciting thing, is that what we're playing for, if we're playing, what we're playing for is eternal and has lasting impact. And it goes beyond one conversation.
So wrapping this up,
yeah,
what's the takeaway? What do you want people to learn from this interaction or series of interactions that they might be able to put into practice today?
Yeah. I think with this particular person, the big takeaways were, one, he didn't leave me a lot of time to talk about, like, the emotional side, that story. You know, he deflected pretty quickly. But to be honest, what could I have said in that? Not one thing. So it served me, right, that he didn't, like, leave me sitting there kind of doing those platitudes, like, oh, I'm sorry that happened. Not that that's not true, but there was nothing to be said about that kind of trauma. And as far as the intellectual side of it, this, all this quantum physics and all of that, I think the takeaway is, say, I don't know. It actually is an answer. And I think it does have a disarming quality to it. Like, someone who's thinking, hey, you're going to come up here and you're trying to get me with this Christian propaganda, to admit, like, hey, I haven't researched that. I don't know. I'm not going to, like you said earlier, we could make something up. We could. But that would probably do more harm than good. So I think knowing that I don't know is a perfectly perfect, like, answer. Like, I'm hopeful that anytime I say I don't know, that somebody might actually find the answer in their time, like looking at a Bible or wrestling in prayer or talking, that they don't just come thinking I'm going to get an answer and have it downloaded from Google to me, that I might actually think about it myself. So I don't know might move the needle just as much as an answer. But I also think that if there's spiritual situations going on, or if it feels like this is more than just emotional, this is more than just science questions, that finding common ground is an open door. It is a crack, and it can be found in a lot of different places. And thankfully we have a lot of, movies and songs and different avenues that we could just build common ground and get that person to just be willing to engage in the conversations. And I think that's a win.
It's a big win.
It's a big win. And it doesn't
win.
always feel like one at the time. It can feel like a failure when you walk away, right? And it's like, that conversation didn't go what I wanted it to go. But we have no idea what God is going to do with that conversation beyond this.
No, and when you know that it's a process, you're just part of it, God's in charge of what's going on, then it's fun to just be where he's got you. Yeah. So, great stuff. Seriously, thank you for being here. This is a great conversation.
Yeah.
All right. You come back and do it again? Maybe? A couple more times? All right. We'll see you down the road, I hope, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Reach podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That'd be a good idea. Share it with a friend and leave us a review to help others find the podcast. Now, for more resources, please visit reachothers.org and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we'd love to hear from you.